Hank was so close to discovering the truth about who really was behind that good as blue, 99% pure stuff that even we wanted. The signs were there from the very beginning of the show, hiding in plain sight, but he missed every single one of them. How? Might be his ego and perception of Walter. He could never imagine that his brother-in-law, someone he saw as weak and rather pathetic, could be the one behind everything. That is, until he finally discovered the truth while taking a shit at Walter's house, reading a book that Gale had given to Walter. So I'm gonna go through all the clues Hank missed. Some are more damning than others, but they're all evidence. And as the show progresses, they become increasingly obvious. The raid. The first clue comes from the very beginning, the ride-along. Now this might not seem like much, but think about it. Everyone in the family knew Walter would never agree to go on a DEA raid. It was completely out of character. Unless of course he had other intentions. And then in a very strange move, he specifically asked to see the laboratory.
Do you think I might get to go inside? See the actual lab?
The laboratory equipment. This is the first major red flag Hank completely overlooked. When Hank visited Walter's school, he discovered that a lot of glassware and 2 gas masks were missing from the chemistry lab. Walter himself admitted that he and others had keys to the storage room. Hank immediately suspected that some meth cook probably stole the equipment, but here's the thing. Not many people know how to cook methamphetamine well enough. Walter is literally a professional chemist who specializes in these exact materials, but Hank's perception of his weak, nerdy brother-in-law made him dismiss Walter instantly. Big mistake.
We don't want people to start wondering about you, man.
Walter's absences and his second cell phone. In the first 2 seasons, Walter spent tons of time away from home after his cancer diagnosis. He was supposedly getting treatment, but in reality, he was cooking meth. His whole family knew about these absences, yet nobody found it suspicious, except Skylar, who first thought he was smoking weed, then later suspected he was having an affair because he had a second cell phone. I know this plot is part of season 2, but it has a lot to do with his supposed absences. If Hank somehow connected the absences plus the second phone and those chemical instruments disappearing from Walter's school, at minimum he would suspect him a little. The video of when they steal the methylamine. I know this might sound like a stretch, but hear me out. The surveillance video of the methylamine theft was crucial evidence. When Hank and Gomez first watched it right after the heist occurred, they made fun of the thieves. One of them even joked that one thief seemed smart but clearly lacked street experience. If Hank had examined that video more carefully at the time, he would have noticed that one of the thieves had Walter's exact physical characteristics, and the other matched Jesse. He actually did go back and re-examine this video later in season 5 after he discovered the truth, and that's when he realized how obvious it had been all along. To be fair, at the time of the original heist, Hank didn't know too much about Jesse either, so he couldn't have identified him, but still, another missed opportunity. Hank searches for Jesse. Hank went looking for Jesse to get answers about Walter's sudden disappearance. But guess what? Jesse was also missing. What a coincidence. Hank knew that Jesse supposedly sold marijuana to Walter. Then he found Jesse's car at Tuco's cabin with almost $70,000 inside, which made him suspect Jesse was involved with Tuco and the blue meth operation. Walter disappears. Jesse, a main suspect possibly connected to Heisenberg, also disappears at the exact same time. Then Walter magically reappears, and boom, Jesse shows up too. And Jesse's car was found at Tuco's place, where Tuco himself had mysteriously been injured. Jesse and Walt were literally just a few meters away from Hank too. Another massive missed opportunity. And ironically, because Hank killed Tuco, Walter was able to keep operating. Badger's description. In the episode where Saul Goodman is introduced, Badger gets arrested. Walter and Jesse threaten Saul to help keep Badger out of prison. During interrogation, Badger tells Hank that Heisenberg is old, about 50 years old, and bald. Sound familiar? Those are literally Walter's exact characteristics. Then they pay some guy named James Kilkelly to pretend to be Heisenberg and take the fall. But Badger had never actually met the real Heisenberg, so he couldn't confirm it was the right guy. Walter then intervenes at the arrest in the strangest, most convenient way possible, and the DEA officers, who have a full description of who they're looking for, somehow don't suspect Walter even though he's standing right in front of them. When Walter leaves, Badger is with the supposed Heisenberg, and Hank is the only one who doubts it's really him. The bag with money. At the end of season 2, Skylar kicks Walter out of the house.
I want you to pack your things and leave.
Right there, that should have raised some red flags for Hank. Think about it. Walter's been having all these mysterious absences, he disappeared for days without explanation, and he's been carrying around a second cell phone. Now his wife is kicking him out. Something doesn't add up. But here's where it gets absolutely ridiculous. Hank helps Walter move his stuff out, being the good brother-in-law that he is. He picks up the duffel bag and immediately notices how insanely heavy it is. He makes a joke about the weight, and Walter, in the most suspiciously bold move, actually says,
$500,000 in cash.
Here's the thing about Walter's strategy. It was brilliant in the most twisted way. His bold statement about the $500,000 in cash actually worked because he understood exactly how Hank saw him. Hank viewed Walter as weak, harmless, and pathetic. So Walter knew that direct lying would never work. Instead, his only option was to hide behind Hank's unshakable belief in his weakness. By telling the truth in such an outrageous way, he made it sound like a joke. And Hank bought it completely. Because there was no way his pathetic brother-in-law could actually have that kind of money. Add to that all the genuine misfortunes Walter was going through, the cancer, the family falling apart, getting kicked out of his own house, and he looked more like a victim than a criminal mastermind. Walter weaponized Hank's perception of him, and it worked perfectly. The RV incident. This was another huge missed opportunity. Jesse unintentionally led Hank straight to the RV that was about to be destroyed. Walter was inside, taking one last look before it was gone forever. Hank showed up and tried to force his way in, but Jesse told him he needed a search warrant. While Hank waited for the warrant, he got a call saying Marie had been in an accident and was in the hospital. This was Walter's idea, the only way to get Hank away from the RV. If Hank had just brought backup or waited a few more minutes, the entire story would have been different. What still surprises me a little is that now Hank believes that Jesse is involved with the blue meth, and even knowing that Walt is connected with Pinkman because supposedly he sold him marijuana, yet he still doesn't suspect his brother-in-law. The WW initials. After Gale's death, Hank found his lab notes with an inscription that read,
To WW, my star, my perfect silence.
Along with a Walt Whitman quote. Confused, Hank brought the notes to Walter, hoping he could help figure out what WW meant. But then Hank, half joking, said the most obvious answer.
Walter White.
If you watch this scene carefully, Walter visibly flinches when his own name is mentioned. There's a brief flash of panic on his face before he nervously laughs it off, saying,
You got me.
in the most sarcastic tone. Any observant person would have noticed how suspicious his reaction was. The nervous laughter, the change in his expression, the uncomfortable energy filling the room. But Hank, blinded by his perception of Walter as harmless, just laughed along and moved on. He literally said Walter's name as a potential suspect and watched him react like a guilty person, yet still didn't connect the dots. This was one of Walter's closest calls, and Hank let it slip right through his fingers simply because he couldn't imagine his weak, pathetic brother-in-law being the criminal mastermind he was hunting. Gale's laboratory notes and Walter getting drunk. First, we need to talk about the lab notes again. When Hank showed them to Walter while sober, Walter played it cool and even told Hank that he had actually caught Heisenberg.
God, I wanted to get this guy.
It looks like you did.
But then in the very next episode, Walter gets drunk on wine. Hank had been idolizing Gale as a genius, giving him all the credit for the blue meth's quality. This damaged Walter's ego so badly that he couldn't help himself. He assured Hank that Gale wasn't Heisenberg at all.
This genius of yours. Maybe he's still out there.
Those words made Hank go back and re-examine all the evidence. He noticed something weird. Gale was vegan, so why did he have a Los Pollos Hermanos bag? This led him to investigate Gus Fring, which brings us to the next point. Protecting Gustavo Fring. Hank became obsessed with finding something to use against Gus Fring. But after their meeting went terribly, Hank was completely alone in his investigation. So he asked Walter for a simple favor, plant a GPS tracker on Gus's car. A simple job, right? But Walter practically begged not to do it. Extremely suspicious. Just like the time he pretended to be sick to avoid taking Hank to Los Pollos Hermanos' farm. He was actually warning Mike so they could clean up all the evidence before Hank arrived. And the worst one? Walter deliberately crashed his car to avoid going to the laundry facility where the meth lab was hidden. These 3 moments speak for themselves. Hank should have suspected something about his harmless brother-in-law at this point. He was always at the right place at the right time. The fake cartel threat. When Gus told Walter he was going to kill Hank,
Now it's left to me to deal with him.
Walter had Saul make a fake call to the DEA, warning them that the cartel was coming after Hank. This got Hank's house protected with DEA agents. Marie asked the Whites to also come to stay at their house for safety, but curiously, Walter was the only one who didn't go. His excuse? He had to take care of the car wash. The real reason? He was planning to kill Gustavo. Walter Jr. and Holly staying 5 months. Walter Jr. and Holly were among those who suffered the most from Walter's actions. Jr. especially, because he had no idea his father was a monster, but Skylar knew. She saw Walter getting worse every day, so she convinced Hank and Marie to take the kids to their house for about 5 months.
What if we took the kids for a while?
Think about that. What kind of problem is serious enough that you'd ask your relatives to house your children for 5 months? It's not just going through a rough time or thinking about divorce. It has to be something much more serious. Hank should have connected absolutely everything at this point to realize that Walter was the problem, but he didn't, not until it was too late. If Hank had just set his ego aside, all of Breaking Bad would have been completely different. He could have discovered the truth very early on, but he couldn't get past his view of Walter as weak, unmanly, and pathetic. He underestimated him at every turn, and those actions and thoughts, they ultimately led to his death.